Well, hello, everybody. And today on our podcast, I am joined by Amanda Mark. And Amanda Mark is a very long-term WOB member. In fact, I think she's a first 100, as we call her. Amanda works in finance and with stockbrokers. She's the source of many great stories. She owned her own firm, Mintegrity, which again works with stockbrokers. We'll talk about that a bit later. But hello and welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Claire. Welcome. It's good to be here.
So, Amanda, can you give me a bit of a précis of your early career? What did you do at university and sort of then where did you go? Because you were pretty much, there wasn't a lot of women in the stockbroking sector when you started.
No, there was not. So originally I applied for university and then I went backpacking around the world and had so much fun doing that I deferred and deferred. And after I ran out of work visas, I came home and I landed a job for a money market broker as a chalky. So back in the day, starting at the bottom of the rung, writing the prices on the board. In fact, we're a little bit more technically advanced. We used whiteboard and texter.
So you just kept deferring and then you just came back and jumped straight into the market, so to speak.
I did, and I learned a lot. And there was 4 women on a trading floor with 250 men. So it was quite an interesting period. It was the early 90s. I don't think HR actually existed. I think that was payroll. And I actually didn't realize there was sexual harassment until I started work.
And so what happened to you? Because of course, I'm assuming it was in the day when the stock market floor was all that kind of screaming and shouting type of thing that we saw.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't on the equities floor. I was working on a fixed income trading desk, on the semi-government bond desk. So it was still open cry at that time, although we did have a computer page where we would actually type the prices in so our clients around Australia could see that. But we also had a link line down to Melbourne where someone would yell the prices down the squawk box to the Melbourne office because it was quicker than typing the prices into the computer screen at the time. So it was a different world. But I learned quickly that technology was really useful and that it was the way forward. But it also put a lot of people's nose out of joints because they were surpassed by technology. So, something that took someone manually an hour to calculate could go into a spreadsheet and be done in literally 3 minutes. So it gave people a lot of time back in the day to do other things, I suppose, but not everyone was happy with that.
And you worked in Australia, but then you went overseas again, didn't you?
I did. My dream was really to work in financial services overseas. So I came back and I managed to land a job with Morgan Stanley here in Sydney and opened up when they got their ASX membership. So they'd been in Australia for a little while, but they became a member of the ASX. And I worked there. And every year I would put in my performance review that Amanda would benefit by working in the New York office for the following reasons. And the New York office would benefit by having Amanda there for the following reasons. So, and every year I was denied. Well, not every year. I was denied for the first 3 years. So I then managed to secure a job in New York. And of course, that involved doing an interview via video in a conference room set up at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, Sydney time. So that was the only time New York could fit me in to interview me, but I landed the job.
Wow. So off to New York. How old were you?
I was 30. So I'd been working for a while and I just turned 30. Sydney just had the Olympics. They wanted me there immediately. I think it was August. And I said I couldn't possibly relocate until October after the Sydney Olympics had finished. Although I did miss the Paralympics, which was a bit disappointing, but these things happen. So there was an opportunity too good to pass up.
So you went to New York and you didn't know anybody pretty much over there, I'm assuming?
No, I knew a few people internally because they'd been to Australia. I had one friend who had relocated over there, another Aussie girl. So that was good. So I did have a contact in New York who really helped me with things. But I suppose one of the interesting things was I'd come from a small office. We'd had about 25 to 30 people in the Sydney office, and moving to head office where there was 12,000 Morgan Stanley employees across multiple offices in Manhattan was unbelievable. And I had a team of like, I think it was 13 people that were doing what I had half a person do in Sydney. So it was quite an interesting, and my job was just one thing. It wasn't many things. It was just one thing. So large organizations. But I pretty quickly made a big impact because I actually knew how things worked from start to finish. And people seemed to just know what they did. They didn't really look at the whole life cycle of the trade. So I was able to really sort a few things out and make a big difference to the way we operated over there at the time, which was really good.
Well, one of the ways that you made an impression was getting to know people. And in fact, listeners, Amanda brought this up at a recent private lunch that Women on Boards was very privileged to have with the former British Prime Minister, the Honourable Theresa May. And as we were just sitting around the dining table, 14 of us, chatting to the former British Prime Minister, Amanda rolled out this story, and it made such an impact that the advisor who travelled with Lady May told us afterwards that she will be dining out on this. So Amanda, can you tell us how you made an impression in the New York office?
Well, one of the ways was we had there'd been a merger of Morgan Stanley and Dean Witter. And in fact, Dean Witter bought Morgan Stanley. And there was a bit of a power play between the two CEOs, John Mack and Phil Purcell. And one morning I was in, it was a Monday morning. It was really early. I was busy. I happened to get in the office about 6:30 a.m. on a Monday morning. And I'm on the ground floor. I pressed the elevator button and there was Phil Purcell in the elevator. So I got in and I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Amanda Mark, Equity Client Service. And I told him my elevator pitch, what the team had been doing, because you've always got to be prepared for when you meet senior people. And after that, I got off on my 33rd floor and he got off on his 60th floor or wherever it was, way up in the clouds. And after that, I went, that's interesting. And I knew he lived in Chicago and I knew he flew into New York every Monday. And I figured, well, he clearly arrived at the office in the car park underneath and was coming up from the basement, going up to the office. And so I figured that 6:30 was about the time that he landed. So next Monday, I'm in the office for no other reason than to meet Phil Purcell in the elevator again. And I press the elevator and the first elevator arrives, no Phil Purcell. So I stood there, I pressed another couple. And lo and behold, there he was. About 4 elevators later, there was Phil Purcell. So I got in the elevator again and I said, good morning, Phil. Amanda Mark, Equity Client Service. Told him another story about something fabulous that we'd been doing. Asked him a question. Off I got on level 33. Off he went up to the tower. And so I did that every week after that. Now, a lot of times he was not there and I may have spent half an hour pressing the elevator button just trying to run into Phil Purcell. And I think it took him a few months before he actually said, good morning, Amanda. But every week I was there looking for Phil Purcell. And every week I'd tell him something that we had done. And what really this demonstrated was we're at an event later on in that year. And there was a big event and we were all waiting for the CEO to arrive. And he did. And he's walked into a room full of people. He's looked around and the first person he saw that he knew was me. He came over and he said, hi, Amanda, how are you? My boss was floored. And him and I were having a chat. She came over. I introduced her. He said what great work the equity client service team had been doing. She again didn't drop her jaw at that point in time, but I'm sure she really wanted to. But it pays off to do these things. And then a lot of senior people had noticed me because I was talking to the CEO at that point. So it was well worth it to have your elevator pitch ready, and it's got to be current. So you can't just keep the same one. You've got to talk about something else that you're doing, and meet those senior people and have something interesting to say. You can't just talk about nothing. I found out that one of his best mates was Australian, who was an AFL supporter. So I would make sure I knew the results over the weekend so I could give him an update. But, these are the things that you do to make sure that you're noticed and remembered.
It's a great story. I absolutely love that story. And I still haven't worked out that Phil is thinking, this Amanda Mark gets to work very early every Monday morning. Absolutely brilliant. That is just textbook perfect. So tell me, was that good for your career in the States?
It was really good for my career. So I knew a lot of senior people. I got promoted. I knew people outside of my direct area, and which is really good because you can live in a bubble. And when you're in a big organization, it's really beneficial to know how that organization fits together. And a lot of people just get caught up in what they're doing individually. But we really made a big difference. So, our ranking in industry in the industry service, we went from 7th to number 1 in equity client service, in relationship management. So all of our rankings went up because, pulling all of that stuff together. So being Australian and knowing how everything worked, because we had a small office where you do everything compared to a big global organization. But again, even in future organizations that weren't as large as that, again, I made a point of knowing who my team interacts with, what our actual relationship is, and how we can help them, so that you can really make that impression that you're a team player and you stand out from the crowd, because you do really make an impact on better service or better product delivery or better risk management, or whatever it happens to be that you're doing. It's really critical.
So Amanda, were you in New York when the Twin Towers went down?
I was there for September 11. It was the most gorgeous, clear, beautiful spring morning, not too hot, not too cold, bit crisp, just blue sky. I did get to work early. I normally got to work about 7:30, but so I got to work about 7:30 that morning, and it just unfolded. It was horrific. And we, as a firm, we had 3,500 people in the World Trade Center, but Morgan Stanley managed to evacuate nearly everyone. We lost 13 people in the tower that day. They were mainly security guards, and there was 2 electricians, and they were actually helping other people get out of the building. And at that time, I don't believe the PA system was penetrated the interior of the building. So I don't believe the electricians actually heard that anything was going on, apart from a big bang and a rumble and things like that. But it was pretty horrific. And the markets, while the US market closed, the rest of the world didn't. And we still had clients trying to manage their risk and trading all over the place. So it was a pretty horrific day.
You lost a friend too, didn't you? You went back for the Bingham Cup.
Yeah, I did. My roommate at the time, and one of my good friends from high school, who I'd met when he was out here on a rugby tournament, Mark Bingham. He died on United Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania. And in his honour, yes, there's the Bingham Cup. So this year it's the 10th tournament, or actually we didn't have a tournament in 2020 because of COVID, but so I'm off to Ottawa in August for that. So I'm a big supporter of the Bingham Cup. It's the world's largest gay and inclusive rugby tournament. There's teams from around 35 different countries. So everyone's invited to play. Australia has quite a few teams going over there. The Sydney Convicts, who are the current champions. the Melbourne Chargers, the Brisbane Hustlers, Adelaide Sharks, the Perth Rams. I think there's one more. And New Zealand's got a team, so it should be a good event.
Yeah, wow. So you're not playing?
No, I'm supporting and issuing cups and doing whatever's needed to help the tournament along. So
yeah, really nice. When did you come back to Australia?
I came back in 2005. So after September 11, I think my family thought I might return pretty quickly, but I didn't. And I'd been promoted in New York, and there was an opportunity in the Australian office to come back at that senior level, which happens once in a blue moon. So I took the opportunity to come back in 2005.
Who were you with then?
I was with Morgan Stanley for that year, and then when I got back the first year, and then I moved to UBS, and same job, just a different organisation. And on the lead up to the GFC, I had an opportunity to we're doing a bit of restructuring. So I managed to get a redundancy, which is awesome. And then I went out, and my plan was to really just contract and see what I really wanted to do, because I didn't want to go back into the same thing. But the GFC hit, so contracting wasn't really viable at that time. Lots of people lost their jobs. But I managed to get a job with the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC. So that was really interesting during the GFC and the cleanup of that. So get to see a lot of different things on that side. And that really helped me with my corporate governance and, so regulating financial markets, market participants was quite an experience. Different things that you get to work on. And of course, a lot of the people that I'd worked with and kept in touch with, because networking is really important, back in those days in New York, were really senior people at different firms. So as you progress, a lot of your peers progress. So it was worthwhile keeping in touch with a lot of those.
Yeah, I think that's a really great lesson. And of course, we met you at UBS because WOB started 2005, 2006. And that's when we met you, because UBS was one of our very early supporters. Your work at ASIC, where you were regulating all the stockbrokers in Australia, then led you to sort of think about a great business opportunities. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah, it was really interesting because you see a different side of things. And at first, I really wondered what value I could add at the regulator. Coming from the sell side, people talk about, going to, the buy side is being, sell side to buy side. But this was really like something completely different. This was the dark side. Like it was just... Anyway, but it was really interesting, and you actually see a lot of things, and you learn a lot about market infrastructure. I worked on some really interesting projects. So the transition of supervision from the ASX to ASIC, the launch of competition in trading, so the launch of Chi-X, now SIBO. And I got to attend a lot of, I don't know what you call a group of regulators, a murder perhaps, but I would attend these regulatory conferences with the SEC in New York, or with IROC, or different regulators. And so you really got to see a different side to things. And one of the things, after I'd been at ASIC for about four years, was really that the landscape had changed. It was no longer a contractual arrangement with an exchange. It was under market integrity rules, a piece of legislation. So you're operating in a different environment. And a lot of industry just couldn't get their head around how it was different and what they needed to do differently to comply with the rules. So another gentleman, Andrew Tate at ASIC, and I were talking, and we thought that we would set up a consulting firm that would help market participants, so exchanges, brokers, other AFSL holders, comply with the rules. So we help them get their license, keep their license, and we definitely help them when they get in trouble. So, and we have a really unique, COVID's done a lot for flexible work arrangements, but we've been flexible for the last 9 years. So we have a complete remote team. We have the opportunity for them to come into an office. We have an office in 3 different states if they need to, but it's not mandatory. It's a shared workspace, so there's no obligation for them to come in. It works really well. Everything's in the cloud. We have no paper. And we've been doing that for the last 9 years. And I think everyone's caught up with us with all this technology these days.
Technology is a great enabler. Amanda, you said you became aware that, sexism existed and things when you were early on in that trading floor space. You've always been, since then, a great champion for women. How have you seen that shift? I mean, obviously things have changed since the early days of people possibly pinching your bottom on the trading room floor.
Oh yes. We've all seen the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, so I suppose I didn't really understand that what sexual or harassment or discrimination was until I joined the workforce. And it was the culture. It was just the way things were. And you either sucked it up or, I would actually comment back and make comments. And sometimes to my own detriment because, I would be called difficult or I would be, yelled at, of which I would stand there and, if you want to yell, we'll go and talk to someone. I'm not yelling. If you want to have a conversation, I can solve the problem or fix it. But, and so I think what's happened now is, that we're actually protected under laws that this behaviour is not acceptable. I think it's a little bit more subtle these days. I think it still does go on. And I definitely think that women are often perceived to be, you're going to have a career break, therefore there's no point in promoting you, or you're the carer, you do all the child pickup or the looking after aged parents or whatever it happens to be. I still think that we come up against that a lot. And I think that, people, really need to stand up to that and point out, that it is, they can do the job and not be afraid to ask for a pay rise, not be afraid to ask for a promotion, and to really put yourself forward and demonstrate by what you've delivered that you're capable of doing this. So, COVID's been great. It's not about being present in the office. Lots of people, I think the fact that, lots of men and things have done child pickup and had to deal with homeschooling has kind of just changed a little bit of it's given more light to it, I suppose. And, that you can actually have a successful career when you may have those other responsibilities. But, I think women have been disadvantaged for a long time, and I'm seeing some change slowly. We've seen more women on boards, but again, it's kind of stagnated. It kind of went and then it's plateaued. So it's really about, demonstrating I asked for this transfer to New York every year, and I put down why I would benefit from it. You've got to put these things down. You've got to not be afraid to do it. If anyone needs help, asking for a raise or promotion, I'm happy to do that, because you've got to put your voice forward there. A lot of times people go, oh, Amanda's never wanted to be promoted, so we're not going to promote her. But, Amanda does want to be promoted, or did want to be promoted. So it's really about making sure that your objectives are clear and that people understand what you're coming from, and not putting up with that, like calling out that bad behaviour. And I think that that's the change. We still need more of it, but I think that's a change that's coming, that people are actually calling out that bad behaviour. My mother had to give up work when she got married. So married women didn't work. And so that meant the only women in the office were not married. I just think that was the culture at the time. That was the way that it was. And, people look at that and go, well, she's not married, she's in the office, so fair game. There are still men in senior positions that were in that environment. That environment didn't end until the 70s. Hopefully they're at the end of their career and we're getting rid of them now. But, change is a long time in coming.
Yeah, change is a long time in coming. Amanda, do you still keep in touch with your network?
I do. I do. In fact, when I'm looking forward to going to New York, so to catch up with a few people that are over there, because they haven't been to Australia either. So they often, when they would come down here, I would catch up with them. But it's really important to keep those connections and to reach out. I mean, social media has been great for that. LinkedIn's really, really good for that. When people post an article, something, comment. Don't just do a like. Add something to the conversation. And I think the more that women's voices are heard and added to the conversation, the more normalized it is. And I still think that, I was devastated when I came back to Australia, because in New York, we'd done all this diversity training and everything. And women were still a minority in finance. But when I came back to Australia, I felt like I'd stepped 10 years back. Was still the same people in the senior positions. It was still the same culture. It was, and Morgan Stanley, because it was an American bank, was not like a lot of other Australian firms at that time. They were more progressive, and they promoted women, and they had women in senior roles. So I had a lot of good role models, which was really important, I think, particularly in my 20s. And 30s, to see those women in real leadership positions, in strategic positions, heads of divisions, and making those big decisions, I think, was really useful.
Yeah. One thing that's always struck me about you is that you have always had this fantastic, calm demeanor, very professional. People who can't see Amanda, I don't know how tall you are, but you'd be pushing 5'5", I strongly suspect.
Just be 5'5" in heels.
Right. So Amanda is not a super tall person. But you have always had this wonderful approach. You have always met anger or resentment or poor behavior with, calmness. You've always taken the approach that you are going to behave well. Have you ever really lost it?
I may have lost it on the inside, but not on the outside. And, like, as you said, height is a real advantage for women. And so often what I would do is, if something was going on, I'd take a step back so that I have more even, so someone's not actually looking down at me. So learning those things early on in my career was really useful. So no one ever accused me of being short, although I might be. But, always taking that step back, so you're looking people more level in the eye rather than them looking down on you. Making sure that you are commenting in meetings so that you do have a voice, but also, remaining professional. Like, women get labelled emotional, or they get labelled aggressive, or any of those terms, which if you're a man is quite acceptable, but not for a woman. So always just like keeping that calm. Even on the inside, I may have been really, not happy and very upset, because sometimes it's quite upsetting as well. And those tricks about not crossing your arms, like keeping your arms open so you're keeping your emotions in check. There's a lot of things you can do to control how you're seen. I often find talking in a very calm, lowered voice actually really scares men, particularly people when they're very agitated. So it's like, if you want to yell at me, we will go and speak to HR. If you'd like to have a conversation, we can solve the problem now. I'm happy to help your client, but if you're going to yell at me, well, we're not going to do anything. And you can see the turmoil. They want to yell, but they don't want to, they want something fixed. So, it's understanding your role in that as well and keeping you cool. It's tricky. There have been some fireworks. There's been some times where there's been fisticuffs on the trading floor, not over me, but I've never gotten that agitated, although I may walk out. I did walk out in New York. I think it was about -12 without my jacket, because I needed to calm down. I think I had steam coming out my ears at that moment, but I walked around the block. I was frozen by the time I got back.
Wow, it's been a really interesting career. are you interested in stepping onto boards? Now, you've already served on a few, you've reported to loads, you've oversighted a whole lot, you know a huge amount about the regulatory and compliance space, but you're also somebody who likes performance. You built your own company really, really fast into a really successful organization. So, what's in the future for Amanda Mark?
Yeah, I suppose I've part of the reason I went to ASIC was really to help with that corporate governance side of it. So public sector as well. So done the private sector, done the public sector, that part of it. And but then, working at ASIC, you're definitely conflicted with what type of boards you can be on, particularly in the space that I'm in with listed companies. And even now, like, we work with a lot of different organizations. So my goal is definitely boards. That's where I'd like to be. I'm on a couple of advisory boards. I'm on some risk committees, a few different things, but managing your conflicts is really important. And so over time, in the next period, my goal would be to do some paid board roles. But again, probably not in financial services. And I'd probably have to wait a little while longer to get to the listed company space too, just to make sure I'm managing those conflicts appropriately. So we do a lot of work with corporates. We do a lot of work with brokers. A lot of that is ECM, DCM activity. So there's, a lot of information around that I would not like to have if I was on a board. But yeah, that is the next phase of my career, yes.
Well, Amanda Mark, Women on Boards looks forward to being part of that next phase of your career. You've been a wonderful supporter, a great friend, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Claire, for the opportunity. It's always good. Look forward to the next WOB event.